Bam. Welcome to the Tuxes and Tomahawks podcast. My name is Adam Dorito, and I am a paratrooper, I am a farmer, and I'm an oil and gas worker in the state of Colorado. And cool enough is I'm actually on the East Coast right now. Had to go to a Trump event out here. Been doing some podcasts out here with the Jersey guys and meeting up with Mike Crispy and Paul and Grassi and all those guys. And I am really excited because I had another Colorado candidate who's running for Congress right now reach out to me and say, hey, man, I'd like to jump on your podcast. And we got to make fun of TikToks because I apparently couldn't pronounce his name right off the bat. And I apologize for that. But one, it's hilarious. It connected us. And I'm all about it. I want to get as many candidates out there from everywhere to start talking about their issues, why they care about their running for Congress, what's going on in Colorado. Because, you know, coming from the East Coast, I've been out in Colorado for 17 years now. And politics are massively different. Like I said, I grew up as a Democrat when I was 18, right? And then I became a Republican when I moved out west. You know, when I joined the military, went to the Air Force Academy and everything else. So I believe it's really important for people to get to know their candidates. And I think one of the biggest issues that we have in this country is that we just get BS mailers and you hear all this propaganda or everything else being sent up everybody because everybody's always fighting. But I think one of the most important things we can do is do podcasts, you know, actually talk to the candidates, do that long form conversation. And I'm so excited to bring on my guest, Valdamar Archuleta, not Archella, as I said before, because I'm an idiot, but I'm going to bring him on right now. Hey, man, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I had like the Tony Soprano, like, Archella, where's Archella? Bring him over here.
It's fine. Like between my first name and my last name, Valdamar Archuleta, it gets mispronounced all the time. It's really not that big a deal.
No, it's great. Hey, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Like I said, I love interviewing candidates. I think it's the best way for people who, you know, they don't go to the debates, they don't go to all these things. So it's hard for them to get to know their candidates, right? And very rarely you get to have a one-on-one conversation with people running for congressional seats versus like your BS talking points that people post on Twitter and stuff, right? So
yeah, and I like what you said. Like I like doing podcasts because you do have a longer time to actually discuss things and get your ideas out. I'll do radio interviews that last like 8 minutes. And then by the time it's over, I'm like, I don't think I really said anything. Like, I don't even know if I answered the question because it moves so fast.
No. So Valdamar, and I'm pronouncing that correctly, right?
Yes, you are.
Oh, perfect. At least I got that one right. So who are you? We don't know each other. I have no idea who you are. Where did you come from? And what inspired you to even get involved in politics and run for congressional seat number 1, which represents the people of Denver?
Yeah, it's a good question. My name, again, I'm Valdamar Archuleta. I was born and raised here in Denver, Colorado. So Denver is my home. Graduated George Washington High School here. And for a while, I moved away. I grew up a Jehovah's Witness, which was an interesting thing in itself. But I always tell people being a Jehovah's Witness was the perfect training to become and get involved in politics because you knock doors, you talk to people, you're used to debating ideas with people who disagree with you. You learn to speak and all this other good stuff. So I moved to New York when I was 19 and went to the world headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses in New York City. So across the river from you there in New Jersey, I'm not sure what part of New Jersey you're in, but
I'm right next to the George Washington Bridge. Like I am literally 1 mile directly straight across from the bridge.
Yes, I don't know if you remember where like the Brooklyn Bridge. Do you remember that big neon watchtower sign that used to be on the Brooklyn side of the Brooklyn Bridge? That's where I lived for about 6 years. And I always tell people going there was kind of like a combination of joining the military and going to college. I'm sorry, I don't know if you can hear my cat. She's like, I don't know what she wants. She's meowing for some reason. Because you kind of go into this position where they kind of tell you everything about your life, where you're going to live, where you're going to eat breakfast, where you're going to work, which congregation you're going to go to, and you work 6 days a week. Then the one day you have off, you go out and preach, and it's a little crazy, but I think it was good for me as a young man to just kind of learn a lot from that. And so I did that for 6 years. I moved back to Colorado. I did go through a seminary school with Jehovah's Witnesses. Came here, they assigned me to a congregation in southern Colorado in a little town of Walsenburg. I don't know if anyone knows where that is. It's in between Pueblo and Trinidad. There's only like 4,000 people there. And that was a learning experience in itself. I had never lived in a small city. I went from Denver to New York City to that. But I learned a lot about rural America and what was happening in issues and that are important to them. And so it was very eye-opening, and it was good. But in time, I ended up back in Denver. I was in Colorado Springs for a while, but Denver's home. Throughout this whole thing, I would come back to Denver because my parents lived here, other family was here. So even when I was gone, I always had a connection to this city. And so it is a very important place to me. And despite the issues and problems that it's facing right now, I still think it's a wonderful place with wonderful people. When you put politics aside, and it's good. I kind of got involved in politics when I lived in Colorado Springs. I'll make this a long story short. I eventually I am a gay man. I came out as gay and was kicked out of the Jehovah's Witness church, and that's a whole thing, and ended up living in Colorado Springs. I knew nothing about politics because I'm not sure what people know about Jehovah's Witnesses, but they don't vote. They don't, get in politics involved at all. So I knew absolutely nothing. But when I moved to Colorado Springs, I got involved with the Pride Center there, eventually joining its board, and I guess getting involved in politics in working for LGBT rights and all that at the time. And this was about 10 years ago. And so I didn't look at it as political at the time, but looking back, I can see it really was a very political thing I was involved in. I eventually stopped that because I felt like, after my time was served on the board, I didn't run again because I felt we as a community kind of reached the point where we have all the rights everybody else does. And, at the time, I feel like we were fighting to just live our life, let other people live their lives, and just assimilate into the population. And that was it. And I was like, well, we're kind of there. There's nothing I can't do that other people can't do. As the movement has progressed, I think it's made a turn where now the LGBT activists are kind of fighting for special rights and forcing people, like forced celebration, not just forced exception, but forced celebration, forced language. And I do not agree with that at all. So while it was, I guess maybe it was when that was first starting, I don't know, but something about the movement just kind of seemed like it didn't fit who I was anymore. I moved back to Denver. And it was probably in 2016 with the presidential election when I started paying attention, because I was like, well, this is kind of interesting, Hillary and Trump. And I started watching them. And the more I paid attention to politics, the more I realized I agree with Republicans and right wingers far more than I agree with Democrats and the left, which was a surprise to me because before working with the Pride Center, they had kind of told me that, Republicans bad, Democrats good. And I didn't question that. But when I actually thought about the beliefs I have with liberty and freedom and allowing everyone to be who they are, especially growing up in a religion, even though I was kicked out, I fully support their right to believe what they believe and worship the way they worship, as I believe everyone else should. I'm not mad at them for doing what they did. They have the right to have their beliefs. And so that's always kind of how I felt. Like I understood that. And so I ended up in this position here in Denver, getting involved in politics. I think it probably started with me going to Trump flag waves. And then I met a bunch of people. I was always known as the guy with the rainbow Trump flag that would go to all these events and wave it there. I got involved with the Log Cabin Republicans, who are the LGBT side of the Republican Party. And working with them, getting to know different politicians and people throughout the state. And in 22, they had the state party at the time. Someone had reached out to me and asked me to run in CD1. And I said no, because I just thought that was ridiculous. I'm like, I can't run for Congress. I'm just some guy here in Denver.
Just a dude
That's
being a
not
dude.
me. So what did you say?
Yeah, just a dude being a dude, right?
Just a dude being a dude. I can't do that. But it started a lot of conversations as to how this can be a good platform to reach out to people in the city. I think Congressional District 1 is a very unique district, especially within the state of Colorado, because it is completely inside the city of Denver. It pretty much follows the city lines all the way around. So it's entirely urban and very urban. And it is the people of Denver. There's a few little spots of Arapahoe County that pop up. Like the teeny little city of Glendale there is technically Arapahoe County, completely surrounded by Denver. And so it is a very unique population who their way of thinking, the things that matter to them are going to be very different than almost Colorado at large. So messaging to this group of people is very unique. And I think that Republicans overall have not done a good job of reaching out to our urban communities. I love what I'm seeing now in the Trump campaign. Like he was in Detroit. That was awesome. He went to the Bronx.
Yeah, I
That
saw
was
that.
awesome.
I thought that was really
I
good.
I love that, and I hope that that sends a message to other candidates to go places where you think you might not be welcome, because you'll be surprised. I've gone to places around Denver. I went to a meeting up at the Denver Northeast Islamic Center, and I was completely welcomed there. And they loved the message that I was bringing. And in talking to them, what mattered the most to them was family and family values, and that transcends across so many demographics, whether it's the Black community, the Hispanic community. And Republicans really have a niche in that area, and we need to take advantage of that we reach out to these communities and talk about issues about that are affecting families, because that's a winning message. Even and if that's a winning message in a place like Denver, how much more is it going to be a winning place, like in CD5 or 4 or wherever? So I know I took like 20 minutes to answer your question, but
No,
that's who I am.
no, this is great, Valdemar. And I think your experience in New York City, like I said, in the TikTok I made, right? Like I grew up in New Jersey. I grew up with gay
Yeah.
people. Like, I grew up in that East Coast Democrat, old school Democrat environment, right? And I just had such a different perspective of it than when I moved out west. I think, like you stated, a lot of it is forced messaging at this point. And
Mhm.
it's definitely evolved over the last 20 years where we're seeing the gay people like, hey man, we may not agree on like how to raise a family or like societal values
Yeah.
on marriage or something like that. Like I'm a Catholic, right? But I'm not going to force my beliefs and my stance on those things on those communities. You have free will. You can live your life the way you want to. I agree. And one thing you brought up is like you're a strict constitutionalist. Like we have constitutional rights and every
Mhm.
American embodies those values. And I think that's awesome. And as a gay man, coming into this race in Denver, where you have a much more diverse community than many parts of rural or even residential
Yeah.
areas in Colorado, that's a great perspective that I think people in the community, maybe more of, and I hate to say the word extremist, that's probably not the right word, but where we're seeing like hormone therapies, or we're seeing
Mhm.
like a forced transgender ideology, for people under the age of 18. Hey, my perspective on this is do whatever you want when you're over the age of 18. I
Yeah.
don't care, but I just don't advise messing with kids, mastectomies, hormone
Mhm.
therapy, things like that. And I think even most of the LGBTQ community agrees with that. That's my personal opinion. And what is your perspective on those things as someone who you grew up in Colorado, you went to New York City, you came back, and as a gay man who's running for Colorado District 1 in
Mhm.
Denver with such diverse values in different communities, how do you view these issues now in such a critical election race?
No, I would agree with you. I think that those aren't popular stances to take when it comes to children. And I would completely agree. Again, as an adult, do what you want, especially if it comes to body modification or cosmetic surgery or anything like that. I do think you should make sure you're well informed before you do it. But as an adult, do what you want. If you want to turn yourself into a tiger or a dragon or get boob jobs or facelifts or whatever, like do what you're gonna do. And it's kind of the same, I think, when it comes to transitioning genders, that it really is cosmetic. That's what's happening, is you're making a cosmetic change. And I don't believe that children can consent to something like that, especially when it comes to the genital area, where in doing this, you are sterilizing yourself for life. A child cannot make that decision. And I also, like, again, going back to, this isn't popular in the LGBT community. What they've done is they brought up this term, gender affirming care. because it softens what you're actually talking about. And
Agreed.
it's just affirming. It's just care. We want to help these kids, that's all it is. We're just
But are you
affirming.
helping them? Like, are you really helping them?
No, you're not. Not when you're doing this. Like I say, if your child comes to you and they tell you they are transgender, love your child, support your child, but don't do anything to them that's going to be life altering and change their body forever. We want to support these kids. I think a lot of kids right now are very confused. There's a thing out there called rapid onset gender dysphoria, and they're trying to wipe it from the internet. There's studies on it, and sometimes they're hard to find. And I really think these studies should be widely available to everyone and looked at. When I found some, I've downloaded them, so I have them in hard copy, or at least on my computer, so I don't have to worry about them disappearing. But kids are confused when they're hearing all these things. Like, you can just be whatever gender you want. You can flow back and forth. Gender's this weird thing that no one quite understands. They're making it more complicated than it needs to be, and it's tough on kids. But anyway, going to the point that it is something that's not popular. I was at an event last night. It's Pride weekend in Denver, by the way.
It is. It definitely is Pride month.
As even as a gay man, like, I am so tired of this. Like, I have told people, I think I appreciate celebrating the rights that were won and the victories won or whatever, but I think it should be one day and that's it. And everyone, no celebrating Pride throughout July and August and September. There are celebrations that go into like even October, and then October is LGBT History Month, and then you have this day of visibility and that day of visibility. Like, it's too much. Let's do it on one day and get it over with, and let's all move on. But anyway, that's a side note about Denver. But
Yeah.
so an organization here was having a fundraiser, and I went because I gotta make myself show up to events and support the different peoples in the community. But it was an LGBT event, and a mother came up to me very angry at me. I don't know how she knew who I was. She saw me on TV or something, but she was very upset with my shirt, and she's like, "Your shirt, that doesn't represent all of us." And it was a Betsy Ross flag. And I was like, what's wrong with this shirt? Like, how does this not represent all of us? But we got down to the heart of the matter, and she was just upset about my stance and policies in regard to transgender children, which are what we've just talked about. Like, I told her, like, I think, love the child, support the child, but don't do these things. And she started going on about how, like, that doesn't happen. No one's doing surgeries to children. No, that's not happening. So that tells me that even her, and it is happening, by the way.
Oh, it is happening. It's misinformed.
That's another discussion. But what that tells me is she recognizes that it's wrong. And you can't have this. So even with her, someone who's fighting for, I think she said she had, I don't know if it was a boy or girl, but she had a trans child. And she was very upset, but even she recognized a child getting a surgery is too far. And so she kept saying, well, that's not happening. That's not happening. Which I was like, well, then why? Then what's the big deal about making it illegal? Like, if it's not happening, there should be no issue there. And then I brought up hormones, because I was like, and I think hormones are the same way. She was all for that, but she has this belief that, puberty blockers don't hurt the child. And
I would disagree.
I would disagree as well. And it was interesting because she was very passionate and upset. Her husband was standing next to her, not saying a word. And so I could tell she was not listening. Huh?
Did they have kids by any chance?
They do. I think they have a trans child who was not at the event. It was it was an adult event because there was alcohol and all that stuff there. But
sure.
At one point I could just tell, like, all right, she's upset. She's not listening to me. So I turned to her husband and just said, look up what's happening in Europe with hormone treatment for children. They're stopping it because they're recognizing this is bad. And which she got mad at me, like, why are you talking to him? And I just completely ignored her. Like, look it up. Because this look on his face, I can tell, like, he's actually listening to the words I'm saying. She's having an emotional response, and no matter what I say, she will not be appeased. And I can understand, how it can be difficult when it's your child. She also brought up the thing they always say, do you want my child to kill themselves? Which is an extreme reaction.
That's just hyperbolic talk.
Exactly. And so I do feel bad for parents who maybe don't know. They've been told things like that, and they love their child, they want to take care of their child, and they don't know what to do, and they do think they're doing the best. So there's a balance you have to have there when speaking to like a parent like that. Like, I don't want to completely disparage her and tell her something that's gonna like completely hurt her, which was why I turned and started talking to her husband, because I'm like, he looks like he's actually listening to the words I'm saying, and I would just like them to maybe put something into their head that they will go home and start them down a rabbit hole of what's actually happening with trans children. And so, like, if he just goes home and looks up what's happening in Europe with hormone treatments to children, maybe that will open his eyes, and then maybe he can have a conversation with his wife. Because you know what? I'm sure they do love their child and want what's best for their child. I don't know their whole life, so I don't know. But I do feel bad for parents who are being told things like, do you want, they tell me, do you want a dead daughter or a live son, or things like that, which is a horrible thing to tell anybody.
That's just, I mean, to be fair, that's just a way of like putting misinformation out into a public that's generally not educated about politics or procedures, right? And to be fair, like I've worked the federal legislation side for 14 years. Like, I have worked for military advocacy. I've been to DC a lot, mostly fighting for changing policies on rape and sexual assault in the military, especially at the Air Force Academy, Fort Carson. Like, that's what I have focused on for a long time. And then I was asked in the background, like, hey, you should get involved in local politics. And I'm like, I really don't want to jump into this cesspool. I'm like I said, I got shit to do. I got a job. I got things to take care of, oil and gas. I'm traveling around all the time. Like, what do I really have time to get involved in? And then I think you might agree with this perspective as well. The people that get themselves involved in politics are mostly like people who, this is generically speaking, like, don't have a job, or they're retired and they can show up to these meetings, like they can physically be there. Most, like 80% of probably Colorado doesn't have time to go to these meetings. That's why I think like podcasts like this that we could disseminate and put on people's feeds is so important. And you're seeing the extremists from both sides. I would say the hard right and the hard left are the ones that will actively participate in these groups. They put out about a lot of disinformation, whether you have the extremist stuff, and I'm sure we're going to get this, like, we're going to burn the pride flag. It's like, all right, calm down. And then the other side's like, I'm going to trans the kids, and then I'm going to give them hormone therapy when they're 5. Yeah. It's like, most people don't agree with that, right? Like, I would say that the majority of Americans and Coloradans just, not that they don't care, they don't have the time to participate in these politics. Like, they're so uneducated about, like you. I think if most people could sit down with you and have like an honest conversation, they would go, oh yeah, we agree on a lot of stuff. Live your life the way you want, Archella. you know what I mean? But as long as you're not fucking with my kids and you're doing the right things and you're voting for the things, that's great. And I think it's really admirable that you are someone who believes in conservative values, whether that comes to, energy, fiscal policy, government organization, things like that. Like, we may not agree on all the societal things and religion, but that's what the First Amendment's for, right? Yeah. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, everything else. And as a constitutionalist, part of the Republican Party, those are the values that we agree in. We may not have to agree on everything, but even Ronald Reagan said we can't agree on 100% of the things. Even if you get 70%, you're lucky. And I think that's great. But the problem is you have, people like you are trying to have common sense conversations with these people. And you're seeing that even if I talk to this person, I'm never going to change their mind. Right. And I think that's why it's so great that we can talk to everyone else who's the disaffected voters, the independents, more moderate Democrats, moderate Republicans, and try to average out the disinformation and try to come to a common agreement that this isn't about those specific issues. Because at the end of the day, let's be 100% honest. Like, we're an abortion-free state. Is that ever going to change in the state of Colorado? No, it's not. Like, it's just not. But we can agree that the Supreme Court came out and in the Dobbs decision stated that it's now a states' rights issue. And if we want to go right back to the Constitution, like, I, as a Catholic, I do not agree with abortion at all in any circumstance. But The Constitution states that it's a states' rights issue. The state says you can have an abortion. So I respect people's choice to do that if they want. I would wish that they do not, but I'm not going to force my values or my personal beliefs on somebody else because I'm a strict constitutionalist. And I think that's something we can agree on. And I think that even comes down to gay pride or this misinformation about everything else, is that you are free to live the life the way you are. Just don't infringe on the rights of everybody else. And at the end of the day, can we stop spending trillions of dollars fighting wars in other countries? Like, that's the bigger issue, right? Like, that the bigger issue is like, do I really
that's
care?
a much more concerning issue right now than
I don't care what my neighbor, like, seriously, my 3 policies to get me to vote for you: stay out of my bank account, stay out of my bedroom, stay off my land. Other than that, I don't care what you do. Seriously, right? But we get wrapped up in these ideological, so specific issues that don't apply to like 90% of the population, when we're forgetting about we're racking up the national debt. We're not taking care of our communities and bringing those America First policies back to taking care of our communities. I was even talking to my grandmother today. She's 99. God bless her. I did a podcast with her beforehand. I'm going to put her on the podcast. It's so funny to have this 99-year-old lady who's like seen all of half of American history, right? And the power's going out here on the East Coast. Amtrak is losing electrical power to their trains. People are getting trapped in the subways and they have to divert to the path. And you've been in New York City, so you know what that is. But
there's almost nothing worse than being on a subway, and then it just stops and goes black, and you're surrounded by people.
You're like Ace Ventura,
it's hot, and you're miserable, and it stinks, and
you're like Ace Ventura, Pet Detective 2, tapping the rhino. Let's get a little hot in this rhino, like trying to get the fan to turn on, right? And why was that an issue? Well, the mayor of New York City and all these liberal areas out here are so concentrated on green energy initiatives and shutting down power plants that they don't have the power load and the infrastructure base to take care of the over 15 million people that live in this area. But you want to know what I'm going to be worried about? Gay Pride Month. Like that. I don't care. Dance with a flag and your Mariah Carey rollerblades down the street. Don't give a shit. We don't have power to the subways. That's kind of the problem.
Diss Mariah Carey.
I love Mariah Carey. I will. Look, I'm a huge Mariah Carey '90s fan. Like I love the shorts, the rollerblades.
Rise Playland.
There you go.
Mariah Carey and roller skates at Rise Playland.
Like she with a Hummer, like a H1 Hummer.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, sprawled out on a Hummer.
Yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's my America, okay? bring that back, right? But we get, I believe it's a part of the establishment GOP and the establishment Democrats that have been holding power because they just want to be in power. They don't really care about their constituents. They're worried about getting elected. They're worried about collecting fundraising money. And people like you, in my opinion, I think you're running for the right reasons and you actually care about your community. Even your website states, I'm not a politician. I don't have a fancy degree. And that's probably why a lot of people hate you, because you're like, oh shit, he's not going to do what we tell him to do. I've spent a lot of time in DC. I've spent a lot of time with politicians across the spectrum, anywhere from Elizabeth Warren to Tommy Tuberville, to Ted Cruz, to Marcus Luttrell, and Congresswoman Kiggins and everything else. And I will say that there are some people out there doing the right things, but they're not caring about their constituents. And I think we're seeing the power grid fail. We're seeing our national debt skyrocket. We're seeing communities break, inflation, grocery prices, gasoline prices. Now it's starting to hurt Americans. And I know everyone says, oh, this election is the most important in American history. I think this one actually is, at least for people our age right now. Like I said, my grandmother's 99. She's never going to change her political views. Hardcore liberal Democrat. It's never going to happen, right? But she's not going to be around for much longer. Right. And the decisions made now with the establishment that existed in her 99 years on life are not going to affect voters like you and I. So you're running for Colorado District number 1. What do you think are the main issues that are affecting your constituents, and why should people be voting for you? Yeah.
I will say I agree with everything you just said. You are spot on with that. And yes, I think that's one reason, one of the big things I am concerned about is term limits, because I even say to myself, someone asked me one day on the radio, I forget which radio show it was, but how do we know you're not going to become a corrupt politician? And then I'm like, I probably would. If you leave me in Washington for 20 years, I will probably be a horrible politician, and I'll be just as corrupt as everyone else, because you become surrounded and saturated with politics all the time.
It's such
and you live in that bubble where when questions come up and issues come up, You see the other politicians, you see the lobbyists, you see the big money donors. Whereas like right now, when people ask me things, I think about the person I talked to at Cinco de Mayo, or the family I talked to at the powwow, or the guy, the people in the community who I'm speaking to right now. Those are the faces that I see, and those are the faces you should see. But that's why we need to rotate our politicians through. Don't leave them there forever. Being a politician is not supposed to be a career path in this country, but it's become one. That's like my little side rant there, though. Back to your question, as far as what I see the concern in Denver, when I've gone around and talked to people, by far the biggest concern to people is the increasing cost of living, especially with housing. Now, I'm looking to run at a federal level, and I think a lot of these are going to be more handled at the state level, especially here in Colorado. We have a lot of problems right now with our property taxes, and some issues with that. It's skyrocketing and it's ridiculous. And our legislature here in Colorado are basically doing nothing to address the problem. But on that side note, that's what I see people talk about is
you're turning into the state of New Jersey at this point. Like, it's like, oh man, the taxes and housing prices in Colorado are kind of giving New Jersey a run for their money, and that's not good.
Yeah, it is. And I think a lot of people also don't understand, because you'll get the people who are like, our politicians in Colorado have become very anti-landlord. They're doing a lot of things to hurt landlords and property owners, and they're getting people to go along with them, like the mass public, to vote for their issues and policies and support them. And what I don't get is how many people don't understand, especially renters, who become angry with their landlord. And yes, there may be some bad landlords out there, and I get that. But if you're hurting the landlords and the property owners and you're making things more expensive to them, it's going to be passed on to the renters. Like rent is going to go up because of these policies.
Just like grocery prices.
Yeah, it hurts everybody, these policies they're putting out. But like I had one mother tell me that she was concerned, that she's worried that her children will not be able to afford to live here in Denver with her when they grow up. And that's a valid concern. A lot of young people are in a position where they can't really afford to live in Denver because it is becoming so expensive here. And like I said, a lot of that is, local policy and, state policy. But at a federal level, like it's Congress's job to manage the finances of this country. It's their job to, control the purse strings. They come up with the budget. Yes, they have to get it approved by the president or whatever. So they need to work with him, but it's their job. Specifically in Article 1 of the Constitution, it tells them that that's their job. And we have not had a balanced budget since 2001. And our national debt has not been zero since Andrew Jackson back in, I think it was 1835.
People might not like this comment. Andrew Jackson is actually one of my favorite presidents from a historical standpoint, because he threatened to hang every member of Congress from trees outside the White House. And then he had a rager outside the White House when he got elected, and everyone got so wasted they were stealing the curtains and the pillows from the White House.
I have like being that I'm a Native American, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with Andrew Jackson.
I'm not saying he was right in his ethical standpoints. I'm just saying he was a baller and a hardcore partier.
Yeah, when it comes to like keeping the government under control, he was awesome.
Literally threatened to hang them.
He got the debt down to zero. There are some people who make an argument for having a little bit of a debt is a good thing. That's a whole nother subject. But there's no one who thinks it should be what it is now. I think the last thing I had heard is now they're expecting by 2035 we will have a $50 trillion debt.
Absolutely not. And this is what I'm here to advocate for as well with you, man. It's, as somebody who's fought in the global war on terror, and that was my generation's war, like, I'm telling you, what we're doing overseas is not effective. It's not working. And we can't save the world all the time. We're doing it for the wrong reasons in many aspects.
Oh, I completely agree. And I think the argument can even be made with right now our $30 trillion debt is probably higher than that now, but the $30 trillion debt, we're like one of the poorest countries in the world. Who else has a debt like that? Like we need to take care of ourselves here before something bad happens here. So I think people also think that America's always kind of found its way through things. You know, we always somehow make it through whatever crisis we face, and that we're almost like we're too big to ever fail, and that's not true. I went to Africa in 2010, so like 14 years ago, and it
Where'd you
was
go?
amazing. I went to South Africa, Botswana, and Zimbabwe.
Oh, very cool.
And when I was in Zimbabwe, they were selling, and I usually have them. I was actually looking for them the other day and I cannot find them. They were selling $1 trillion bills on the side of the road for like $1, because their money was worth nothing.
Nothing.
And they're beautiful bills. Like the artwork on them, like it's a beautiful bill, but it's worth nothing. And so the people there were just had like stacks of these $1 trillion bills and they were selling them to the tourists. And I don't remember if it was like $1 or $5, but it was practically nothing. You know, you give them $5, you're a trillionaire in Zimbabwe. So yeah, I am a trillionaire in Zimbabwe, by the way, which just means I have nothing. but people think that that's not going to happen here, and I'm like, it could. If America's economy collapses like that, there's going to be consequences that are going to be global, and no one's coming to save us. Like, we're not the one who's going to be like, well, maybe this other country will come bail us out or send us stuff to take care of us. Like, no, that's not going to happen. And I think there are two things that I think are issues that must be addressed immediately. And one of them is that overspending has to stop. Because one, it's inflating the dollar to where things are extremely expensive, but there is a certain point where this is not sustainable, and the economy can collapse. And what that's going to look like, I don't even want to think about. It's bad. The other thing is the border. Like, we have to get that under control immediately. So like these two things are immediate things that our government needs to take care of, and people in our leaders, a lot of them, they're talking, like you said, they're talking about pride and abortion and these other things that are emotional distractions.
They're just unsolvable issues.
You know what I mean? When the
You're
big
never going to get 100% of people to agree on them.
Actually going to hurt us now, they just kind of like push that aside. Like, don't talk about that. So it's a little irritating.
No, I
don't remember
agree,
what question I was answering right now on that little rant I went on.
No, it was like the biggest issues that you think are facing your constituents, and I think you nailed it. I think rent.
Oh,
prices,
yeah. So in Denver, it is like
killing it.
The cost of living. So
yeah. So let's get into some more contentious issues, because this is something that's been driving me nuts. That's why I made that TikTok video the other day, because it drives me absolutely insane watching the Colorado Republican Party as a whole. And I would say there's two sets of this. There's the old establishment GOP, and then there's the more America's first conservative Trump movement, right? I'd say right now that's probably the two camps. There's probably some derivatives of that. Why the hell, in your opinion, in your experience in Colorado, are these people so divided and trying to throw each other's elections and burn each other down to the ground, when the issue is not really ourselves? Like I said, I think we can agree on probably 70, maybe 80% if we're lucky on a good day of the positions of the conservative party, right? But everyone is trying to sabotage each other outside of those principles, when our principles not with each other, it's with the liberal, socialist, Marxist ideologies.
I think most people aren't doing it on purpose. Like, I don't think they're purposely trying to sabotage each other.
In Weld County, they are, though. I will say, in Weld County, I literally watch these idiots, and I will say this because I live there. The disinformation mailers and what these people actually say about each other behind closed doors, like county commissioner meetings or everything else, is absolutely insanity to me. I'm like, I know that's not true. I just talked with you. Like, I just had a conversation with you, and like, I know what you said about XYZ is not accurate, and you're just trying to swing things or throw gasoline on the fire. For what reason, good sir or madam? Like, it just drives me nuts.
Yeah, so I'm gonna kind of tell you a little story here.
Story time with Valdamar Archuleta.
I went to an organization, and this was another LGBT organization. They had a little like lobby day thing, and I went to just represent the log cabin Republicans. They had about 150 people there. I'm sure I was the only conservative person in the entire room. And I disagreed with almost everything they were talking about, but that's, what I expected when I showed up there. Anyway, they were going to go to the Capitol to lobby for things that they wanted to be done. And there was a bill that they wanted to pass here in Colorado. And I don't really remember what happened with this. This was like 2 years ago. And it was to make sure that all government buildings have a non-gender specific bathroom. And someone raised their hand and said, we don't want just government buildings to have that. We want every building to have that. And the person at the front said, yes, I agree with you, but we can't do that right now. We can do this. This can pass. What you're saying will not pass. So we can do this. And then in a few years, we can look at doing that, which makes sense from their side. I don't agree with forcing any building to have to do anything, but from their perspective, I get it. So this person just said, oh, okay, and sat down. And the entire room of 150 people just was like, all right, that's what we're going to do. And I was like, I was kind of jealous because I'm like, that would never happen in a room full of Republicans. Like if someone wanted something else, there would be a huge fight that would break out. Like, no, we want this. No, we want this. And what I love about being on the right and being a Republican is that we do value individual thought, and we're willing to have debates, and we're not going to just be like the Borg with hive mindset and go along with things without thinking, which was what happened in that room. And in some ways, it was kind of creepy that they're like, all right, whatever you tell us to do, that is what we will do. And they even gave them all the talking points. Here's what you say. And everyone completely just went along with it. Like, all right, like, I don't know if you ever read Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky.
I haven't.
It's actually a really good book. I think everyone who's in a position of leadership should read it. I don't agree with all the philosophies in it, but the tactics actually do work. One of the points he brought out is the biggest enemy, and I'm probably not quoting him correctly, but basically the biggest enemy to the individual, our individual thought, is the individual themselves. And what he meant was that we all become so individualistic, we don't work together. And that is something that Democrats and the left they've mastered. They all go along in lockstep. They come together as the collective, and they do as they're told, and they function very well. We do not do that on the right.
No, they follow they follow Che Guevara's instruction manual on guerrilla warfare almost to the T. And I know that because that's what I study as an intel guy, right? So
this thing's happening in Colorado. All right, we have some disagreement, and I know that especially in the media, I think Kyle Clark, I don't know if you know Kyle Clark, if you've been in Colorado long enough. So like he's kind of blamed me for this whole thing. So he thought it was a positive thing to say that, but I don't know. But there are people who are kind of putting upon me a large responsibility for the disunity in Colorado.
Responsibility, Archuleta.
Yes,
Archuleta.
Which I'm telling people now. Like, all right, we had a little tiff. Dave Williams and I did not get along or agree on certain things that were said and messaging.
A lot of people don't get along with Dave. Let's be very clear on that. And this is a good segue into this conversation, right? Because I personally, even though I live in District 8, I care very much about District 5 because that's where I'm stationed. That's where I went to college. I went to the Air Force Academy. Yeah. I know a lot of internal issues that are going on there because Doug Lamborn and Ken Buck has screwed over the military in this state for a very, very long time. And when it came to this election, your only two choices are, Jeff Crank and Dave Williams, just like the only two choices we have for president right now are Joe Biden and Trump. It's like, these are the selections that we got. And I'll give my perspective on this before you lead into this, because I think it's important. I don't agree with Dave on everything, like even down to our faith values. I'm a Catholic. I disagree with some of his things on his non-denominational Christianity, right? You know, but I'm not going to tell him how to live his life and how to worship. When I saw the email come out of the God hates flags, I'm like, secretly, okay, kind of funny. Not the best strategy in marketing, right? And maybe sending that out to the entire GOP. Probably not the best move. As a guy who's worked in psychological operations and intelligence in the military, I don't think I would have done that personally. And I value his personal beliefs on that. I understand if you especially go to the Bible Belt of America, that is very much the perspective of it. You know, they want to torch and burn everything down. But at the end of the day, we have to remember that we're all Americans. And like I said, we may not have to agree on everything, but we have to acquiesce and be acceptable and receiving to other groups in our community and our neighbors. And I don't think that was the best strategy to do that. My response into that is, I don't agree with the messaging on it, but in terms from a constitutional perspective, if you want to burn my American flag, all right, burn whatever flag you want like that. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying from a constitutional freedom of speech perspective, fine. I just think that it ignited the uneducated masses who can't have an educated conversation like you and I, like coming down to the actual issues of it, right? Like for me, it's a constitutional free speech issue, even though I don't agree with maybe how it was messaged. Right. I think you disaffecting members of the LGBT community in that perspective is probably not the smartest thing to do going into an election season. And I don't know if you went to the debate for Jeff and Dave last time. It's kind of funny because they're like two different people when you see them in person and they talk. Like, it's like, why can't you guys talk like this to people? Why does it have to be fire and brimstone all the time on these mailers and email? You know, so I didn't agree with the initial messaging of how it was done. For me, it's a constitutional issue. But like I said, it threw gasoline on something that didn't need any more gasoline thrown into it, right?
It did. And kind of going back to like what I was saying there is like, even with myself being someone who's kind of caught up in this drama, at this point, I'm like, all right, it's time for us to move on. You know, I may not be happy with what our state party did, but I'm going to work with them and go forward because, you know, the alternative is worse. You know, I want to fight for freedom and that, and doing it through the Republican Party is going to be my best chance at this point. And that's also something I was talking with someone today. Is like when we look at political parties, like the political parties are tools that we use to try to accomplish something. It's not like I'm joining a religion or that you have to join a cult like mindset in this political party. You use the party to elect people who you hope have the same values that you do. And so I'm trying to what was the question? What are we talking about? I think I went on another tangent, but
we're talking about burning gay pride flags, people. That's
burning what we're gay pride flags.
We're just going to go right into the heart of the matter. Like Don Henley and the Eagles.
I do also agree with what you said. Like, I don't think burning any flag is good, but it's legal. Like, as long as it's your flag, you know, don't go steal someone else's flag and burn it. But if it's your pride flag and you're not breaking any, you know, burn codes or whatever.
We don't need any more wildfires out here.
Do what you want. Same thing with the American flag. I think that's disgusting if someone does that, but you know, it's a freedom of speech thing. If it's your flag and that's what you want to do to make your statement, you know, make your statement. And I do feel that with the email that came out, you know, as we talked earlier in our discussion, I agree with those topics. We should be protecting children. And I do think there are things where it's gone too far with children being involved in pride. Children should not be at pride festivals. Children should not be at drag performances. It's not where a child should be. And so I am willing to have those conversations, and I think they're important to have. It was just kind of the message that went out, the way it looked, the way it was delivered, it was a little aggressive.
It was a little aggressive.
Tone, the very first sentence, and like I don't remember, it was something, the godless groomers are coming out, and it was rough, and there was no distinction between
the levels of gay
people doing
that,
what I
mean?
Yeah, like it did come across as just all the gays are doing this.
I would agree
And
with
I
that.
know that's not what Dave meant. I've talked to Dave
Yes.
multiple times.
So have I.
I've not had a problem with him. Our last, I will maybe, well, I won't get into it. Our last
No, get
conversation
into
about
it.
a
Come
week,
on. Get into it. Come on. This is what this
about
is
a
so much
week
fun.
ago was probably not the most positive conversation, but I think that Dave and I did agree at the end of the conversation. We move forward. We both want Republicans to win.
Right.
We can have our personal differences and whatever, but we're going to move forward. And that's one thing I was going to get to with what Saul Alinsky said, is that we need to be able to have the little fights and the discussions and the debates about policy, about issues. But at the end of the day, we need to be able to unify and move forward, because if we don't, we're not going to win. And another thing with the political parties, there's a power in numbers.
Yes.
Especially when it comes to the Democratic side of our government, with voting, and you need numbers. If you don't have the numbers, you're not going to win. And so, going back to something I think you had mentioned at the beginning of our conversation here, Ronald Reagan, his quote about, someone who I agree with 80% of the time isn't my enemy. We do have to kind of come to that agreement that, like, all right, I don't agree with you 100%, but I agree with you on most things, the important things. We need to work together and go forward, because if we don't have the numbers, we can't change anything. And even these conversations that we think are important, and they are important, like the ones brought up in the email, they're never going to be solved if we don't get numbers to turn out for us and move forward with things. There are several ballot initiatives, and I have two of them. There's a ballot initiative to keep female sports for female students, I think mainly dealing with schools. And then the other one for if a child in school displays any kind of gender incongruence, the parents must be notified. I have those ballot initiatives. I carry them around with me. I'm getting signatures for them. But again,
Good on
like
you.
that, we need the numbers. If we don't have the numbers, these things aren't going to pass. And we do have a winning message and a winning conversation right now. It needs to be delivered in a way that you're going to reach the audience, because I think Dave is very good at talking to the people who already agree with him and riling them up and getting them to support him. But we need more than that. We need to be talking to the people who don't agree with us right now, or don't know they agree with us, and give that message in a way that's going to win people over. What I fear about this, and we can take it to the whole LGBT thing, and me thinking that Dave don't like me because I'm gay and Republicans hate gays, and I don't believe all that. It was just bad messaging. But go beyond my personal experience here. I want our Republicans to win. We have some great candidates in this state, not just in congressional races, but even in House district races. Right now, the Democrats have a supermajority in the House, and they're very close to having a supermajority in the Senate if they just win one more Senate seat. So it's right along that line. But if Republicans can win 4 more House seats, they can take that supermajority away. So it's very important that we win in Colorado and not allow the Democrats to take any more of the power away from us. So what my concern is with this is, how many people did that email turn off? And right away, people look at that being, it was offensive to the LGBT community. All right. So most of them are going to vote Democrat anyway.
Correct.
So how many votes are really going to be lost? Probably not that many from the LGBT community. But you also have to look at who are going to go with them. Women.
Yeah, the independents too.
Women, and then particularly women. Women love the gays. You just kind of know, if you want women to come to your party, you invite the gays. If the gays show up, the women come with us. And it's the same in political
parties. Exactly how Jersey works. That's exactly how
it works. That's the way it is everywhere. The gays and the women, we get along very well. If you look at when this email first came out, one of the first groups to put out a statement against it was the Colorado Federation of Republican Women. You had Nancy Pelosi in Jefferson County stand up. You had Barbara Kirkmeyer put out a statement. Lisa Frizzell put out a statement. The Republican women were the biggest voices in saying, all right, this went too far. Because again, the women like the gays. You know, you hurt the gay, and I've been reached out to by many of our male legislators and male candidates across the state, but most of them I think kind of had the attitudes like, well, that wasn't really nice, but you know, I don't want to talk about this. I don't care. and I
No,
kind
sure.
of agree with them. You know, I do kind of agree with them, but how many unaffiliated women are now going to not vote for Republicans because they think Republicans don't like their gay son, their gay brother, their gay best friend, their gay hairdresser? Um, there's going to be that emotional aspect to it that you're going to lose a lot of women voters with a message like that. And women voters are going to make a huge difference. So you can say, you know, we lose a few thousand gay votes, so what? Even though we really need every vote we can get.
You
I
do.
don't think have the luxury of saying there's anyone we don't want their vote. But say the gays are just a few hundred or a few thousand, whatever. But the women are a massive voting army that we cannot lose. And so that's what concerned me the most with this email. Is just I don't want this to affect our Republican candidates across the state because I want them to win.
I 100% agree with that. And I think this is a really good segue into the difference between the establishment Republican Party and the Trump America First candidacy candidates, right? Is that personally, from my research and my knowledge of Barb Kirkmeyer, not a huge fan of her. I know she's an establishment Republican. I know she has thrown elections. I know what she's done in the background to people's campaigns, especially in Weld County. And yeah, it's really easy for her to say, I'm a woman Republican who, you know, agrees with the gays and is going against Dave Williams. But is that her real personal perspective views behind closed doors? I can't tell you because I haven't had that conversation with her face to face. But I would say it's more or less of how can we use this to destroy other Republicans to our benefit and get the people we want in office, right? And this is kind of funny because like I have been kicked off of so many forums. All my stuff has been blocked or removed or whatever else on all these forums. When, like I said, open invitation, Barb Kirkmeyer, you want to come on this podcast, you're more than welcome to. But my biggest issue right now, especially as somebody who is very invested in the Trump campaign, like I said, I've been to his house multiple times this year. I know his guys in the background. And I would say every single America First candidate in reality, especially the guys out here, we all agree with the exact conversation you and I are having today. We're not against the gays. We want you to be able to live your life. We're just against the transgender ideology for children and affecting nuclear family structure for the people who do believe in, you know, monotheism, whether it's, you know, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, whatever. That's the basis of what the new, and I call it like the new conservative Republican Party. People our age, right? Because all these older people running, pulling the strings behind the things and county commissioner boards, mayoral races, and everything else. They have so much power and influence because they've been doing it for so long that I believe that they are purposely disaffecting messaging intentionally, such as this exact issue, like, burning pride flags. This is a way we can take out Dave Williams, and this is a way that we can maintain establishment power here in the state of Colorado, especially, you know, what I've seen with the older folks down in El Paso County too, right? And that's where it comes to the issue of like Jeff and Dave in District 5. Now, personally, obviously, I support Dave. I may not, like I said, I may not agree with how everything that he does or perspective-wise, but I know that the federal military legislation that we're trying to pass in Colorado Springs to help survivors of rape, sexual assault, retaliation, Dave would support that initiatives moving forward. I know Jeff Crank won't. I know that he won't because I've had those discussions with those people. And do we want to keep everything the same as the good old Republican Party? Or do we want to change things for the people our age who are the main tax base, who are raising the families in this state and everything else? And then once we get to the general election, then we can start fighting the Democrats on all these ideologies they're seeking. But like you said, is the issue going to this election really about gays? No. It's about fiscal conservatism. It's about being an American. It's about all these individual things that are actually affecting our grocery bills and our gasoline prices. And what would be your message to this political division you're seeing within our own party now? And how do you think that we can best unify collectively, as we've talked about, in order to see those real, actual conservative changes and positive things come back to the state of Colorado?
Yeah, that's an important question that I wish I had a perfect answer for you on. I will say, kind of sidestepping a sec to mention something you talked about. I do completely agree that people are using this to go after Dave, as like this was the I think, I don't
The
know if
shot
Kyle
heard
Clark
around the
said
world.
this. I don't think if Kyle Clark said this on the air or if this was something he told me on the side. But I agree with him. I think he kind of said that what I did kind of gave people permission to kind of jump on the, all right, let's get rid of him. It gave them
Yeah.
an excuse to do that. And so I agree with that statement he made. I think that might have been on the side, but like I think it was an accurate observation of things happening. And infighting and having this, these little debates or whatever isn't necessarily bad. We're going to have them, and there is going to be the Trump, the newer Trump Republican versus the more classic Republican. What I would say to each one of them is, all right, you're going to have your thoughts on all this stuff, and you have the way you want to go about making change and going forward, but you both need each other, because
Yeah.
neither one of those groups on their own is big enough to win and make change. And so you're going to disagree with each other, but you need each other. So at some point you have to find some kind of, and I'm not going to say like a middle ground. That's kind of what we always say, but some kind of negotiation where it's like, all right, here's what we're going to do. And there's going to be fighting within the party for power, for the direction the party's going to go. That's going to happen. But the goal here is unifying enough, because again, we need numbers. And one of the bad things about democracy, I know this will probably
I mean, technically, we live in a constitutional republic. I always like to clarify that with people. Like, we don't live in a democracy.
No, and I agree, but I'm specifically talking about the democratic side of our government, which is voting.
That's fine. Yeah.
So the democracy part, I'm not talking about the full government. When I say democracy, I mean when we vote. That is the democratic
congressional
part.
vote, congressional representatives and the senators
Yes.
voting. It's an actual democracy.
So let me be clear about that. We are a republic.
It's all right. And I don't mean to interrupt you, but it's just like I have dealt with so many people. I just call them the boomers that leave the caps lock on Facebook, who that's how they type things out. And they don't understand even like what the Federalist Papers are, or even when the Constitution was written. Right. And it's just like, what? You're not even knowledgeable about your own country. Maybe you should take a civics test before participating in this constitutional republic.
I've asked multiple, and it's usually Democrats who say that, like, this is a threat to our democracy. I'm like, what do you mean by that?
Shut up.
Like, when you say democracy, what do you mean? Like, are you referring to what? But democracy in general is that it's mob rule.
We don't want that.
The majority, like, to me, the biggest concern is not so much like we need mass voter turnout. It's we need informed voter turnout. Like, I would rather have a smaller group of informed people voting than a mass group of ignorant people who are just going to the polls or filling out their ballots because we told them to.
And another thing on top of that, Valdamar, is that we also need good candidates who understand what it means to be an American and understands the issues. Like, you are an extremely articulate, knowledgeable person about the issues. You haven't said a single thing that I've disagreed with, like, for the last hour and 5 minutes, and that's fucking awesome.
We need to talk longer then, because I'm sure.
No, let's find it. Because like I said, let's get to that 80%, right? Let's get to the 80%. But
and so my thought here is, we are having this discussion, and a lot of Republicans, whether they consider themselves the Trumpians or the more establishment classic Republicans, the ones who are involved, who are going to these meetings at the state, and that we talk about these issues and we know these issues, the general public does not. The general Republican voter does not have these same concerns. And when they look at the party, they don't see the difference. They don't see what's going on. And I was at a meeting today where Denver clerk and recorder was there, and he's a really nice guy, and I don't hold anything against him when it comes to talking about elections, but he was meeting with a group of Republicans, so you can tell how that conversation ended up going.
Yeah.
But someone was really upset because people are not educated about the way things work. And I was like, well, at one, like, what do you want him to do about it? Like, he's the clerk and recorder. He can't
Staring at
force
this nerd
people to
typing away on
become
his computer.
educated.
Yeah.
And that's a problem, I think, all the way around. Because even like, what do we do as a party? How do we educate the people? Because I think that's going to be the biggest thing that's going to start bringing us together.
Podcasts. Seriously, I'm dead serious. Like,
podcasts are definitely a good way. I mentioned at the very beginning, one of my favorite things to do is podcasts, because I think that we can actually have a conversation, and I'm not limited to like 8 minutes. Or I went on a show once where I felt like it was like 5 minutes. I'm like, what can they even learn about me other than my name?
Unless
like,
you've done significant media training.
CD1. His name is Valdamar Archuleta. Like, that was pretty much it. I was not able to actually talk about an issue or talk about a solution to that issue because it goes by so fast. So I do love podcasts for that reason. Because we've been talking for like an hour. We've been able to actually dive into issues, and I've been able to actually give an answer that I feel was complete. Whereas like when I go on some radio shows, and nothing against the radio shows, I know they're limited in what they're doing, but you leave feeling like, I don't know if I really answered that question well. There's so much I should have said that I didn't even talk about. I just hope that it came across well. So yeah, educating the public is something we need to do, and we need to find a way to do it. Podcasts are huge. We need to learn more effective ways of using social media.
That's why
Republicans aren't always great at social media, and I love that you're on TikTok. As much as I know there's that whole China connection.
Now, look, I'm an intel guy. I know how bad it is. I know that you know how many messages I get from random Chinese intelligence officers in the background on that thing, because they all know I work intel, and they try to like, oh, I love your picture. Would you like to go on date? Also, give me your phone number and bank account. I'm like, God damn it, you guys are the worst intel people ever. But you're right. And this is my promise to you. This is because, like I said, I was asked by the people in the background on the big end, hey, get involved in your local politics. And because you do have a little bit of a platform, it's nothing great. I'm not Joe Rogan or anything, right? But I really care about where I live. I really care and embrace my neighbors. And what I know and what I can do is I want to bring conversations like I'm having with you to everyone in Colorado when it comes to any type of race, whether it's county committee. Because you know what? The presidential election, we all know what's going to Biden or whoever else they tried to replace it with before the DNC commission, which is my conspiracy theory. It's going to go to the Democratic Party. But what really matters, Board of Education, your mayoral races, county commissioners, and I would say the most important race, leading up to that paradigm and that pyramid right there is the congressional race, right? Because you are having these conversations. But what I want to do for everyone is I want to be able to have these conversations with all of you. And so anyone in Colorado can listen to the Tuxes and Tomahawk podcast. And like I said, I make no money on this. I do this for free. I do this on my own time. Clarify that outright. And so people, when they're driving to work or they're sitting on the train that hopefully the power doesn't go out, they can learn about who you are, why they should vote for you, or even like, let's say you get elected. And I hope that you do, because like I said, I think the values that you stand for and the people that you represent are very similar to mine. We may not agree on everything, but I can't vote for you, but I would at this rate, because I agree with the conversation we're having about the issues that matter to me. And I'm hoping that if you do get elected, or anyone who gets elected, that maybe weekly or monthly, I could sit down with the congressional candidates or the state representatives. We could talk about the issues going on in the Capitol and what the voters need to know and how they can get involved at the local level, whether it's showing up to meetings, listening to podcasts, or writing letters or making phone calls. I think this is how we educate our population, the state of Colorado and everywhere else, to be better Americans, to be better patriots and participating in your constitutional republic.
Yeah, I would agree. And I'm sure I've stated it multiple times, but and it happens when I go out and talk to people at other events and that too, when issues come up, I'll tell them like at the federal level, that's not our job to regulate that. You really need to get in touch with your city council person. Look who's running for city council. Look who's running in your county. Our state representatives, because they do have a much bigger influence over your life than the federal government. And that's how it should be. supposed to be this way. At this rate, I think the federal government has overstepped its bounds quite a bit, and it needs to be reined back a little bit. But our local government is where it is, and unfortunately, people will know, like they'll know about this senator or that congresswoman from Texas or New York or California, but they don't know who represents them at their city council level or who their school board person is.
And another thing too is researching their voting records, right? Like actually know what these people are voting for. Like they can, you know how politicians work. You're one of them. A lot of people say things and then they vote a different way. And like one of the biggest contentions is I got a coffee cup thrown at me once by an old woman, and we were bringing up what's going on in District 4, right? Obviously, Lauren Boebert is the lead contender there. She's a MAGA Republican. She's an America First candidate, Trump endorsed. And, the one thing that was said to me was, I would never vote for that woman because she's a country hussy. And I'm like, okay, calm down, lady. And then she's like, she gives hand jobs in the back of Denver movie theaters. And I'm like, all right, great. And she's like, and that's why I wouldn't vote for her. And I sat there and went, have you looked at her voting record, though? Her voting record's solid conservative values, and she's never wavered on those issues. And then I go, well, ma'am, how many kids do you have? And she's like, I got 4 wonderful kids. And I'm like, well, how many grandkids do you have? And she's like, I got 6. And I'm like, and how many hand jobs did you have to give to get that family? And she's like, I can't believe you'd say that. And I'm like, let's be honest. Like I said before, I don't care what you do behind closed doors. What I care about is your voting record and you standing for the America First values and supporting, the Republican, candidate going into this election. And it is Trump. This is a Trump election. It's 2024. That's just what it is. It'll be somebody else in 2028, right? But look at their voting record if they have one. And if they don't, if they never run for Congress, like you've never run for Congress before, right? Just to clarify.
I have not.
Right. So no one knows what your voting record is, but people can come to this podcast in the future if you decide to run again or go run for president of the United States. Good for you. And they can sit there and say, this is where he stands on these values. This is where he stands on these issues. And I have something I can look back on. And let's stop electing people that say one thing and vote for the other. And that goes for any party in general, right? We need people that are principled at what they stand for, the people that they represent, and what they want to do. And I think that you are a breath of fresh air to this movement in the new America First Conservative Party. You may not agree with everything that other candidates are doing in every other district, but I think you are bringing a rallying cry to the Republican Party in the state of Colorado that has a common sense approach that doesn't affect the way you want to live your individual lifestyle, but that benefits all Americans that you want to represent. And I really just want to commend you on that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I hope I can live up to all that praise you're throwing at me here.
Look, if I disagreed with you, I'd call you out on it straight up. Like if there was something that you said that was really dumb, I'd say it. But like I said, we've had this conversation, and I'm like, all right, all right. Actually, no, wait. I'm gonna say an issue that you're gonna cause a shitstorm over. You ready? You ready for this? All right. You lived in New York. You experienced the sweet justice of what a real Jewish bagel and pizza is like, and you come back to Colorado and it just doesn't exist. Who makes the better pizza, the East Coast or
what was Colorado? The craziest thing I heard? I saw an article that was going around saying that they rated the best pizzas in the country and Denver was rated #1, and that is not true.
Thank you. All right. As long as we say that's right, Coloradans, your pizza sucks.
Sorry.
Everything in Chicago is lasagna. It's just
I think Chicago pizza is very good because it's thick and all that, but
it's lasagna. It's not pizza.
Not pizza. It tastes good. I'm not downing it. Like it's good. This big thing with all the stuff on it, but nothing beats. New Jersey and New York, I think, are very similar. I will say, I think the Bronx has the best pizza I've ever had anywhere in my life.
Hell yeah.
Except maybe Naples, Italy.
But that's not America, and I'll go down there and invade that country and take all their stuff and bring it back because that's what we do.
Naples, Italy probably had the best. But yeah, in the United States, New York has the best pizza. Specifically, I think the Bronx has the best pizza. But
thank you for clarifying that Colorado pizza sucks. Actually, there's only one pizza place in Colorado that comes close. It's Borriello Brothers in the Springs.
I was about to tell you, Borriello Brothers is good down in the Springs. Is it still there? Last time I was down there.
Funny story about Borriello. No, so funny story about that. When I was a cadet at the Air Force Academy and I was desperate for New Jersey pizza, I found these guys, and then I used to pay like $50 to get one pie just delivered to the academy because we could never leave. We're in prison there, and And then they shut it down. Everyone's like, why'd they shut Borriello Brothers down? Well, apparently it was actually legitimately run by the mob, and they were using it as a cash funnel in the background. And the
That's how you
CBI
know it was a good pizza
right.
place.
So why shut it down? Why?
Why?
I don't care. I don't even care.
I don't care either. Open it back up.
Yeah. So they did.
When I was in the
other one.
Bronx, I went to an Italian language congregation, because that's where I was assigned. So I had to learn Italian. I learned enough to get by. I was not great, but yeah, they even said that they're like the Italians in the Bronx, like the best food comes from the mob owned places, because one is like it's the food they eat, so it's real, it's good, and they're making the money off other stuff happening, so it's usually relatively inexpensive because they don't care about the money coming from the restaurant.
Hell yeah, it's always a shithole. It's got like 2 ovens. It's got a chair broken, like a wooden table. They still have like the red and white checkered plastic tablecloths, all over the place with little pepper shakers, right? And then they go, "You want a pizza? Yeah, all right. Yeah, you get your pizza. Shut up. Don't go through that door. You understand? And no, we don't have a bathroom that you can use. Don't ask any questions."
Yeah, not that I
appreciate that culture.
I say not that I'm condoning the mob in any way, but
you can have your
I
pizza
also
place,
was kind of like, I don't care. Just they had good food. Like I don't care what's happening back there. They were the best restaurant. So that would make sense to me that Borriello Brothers had that connection. Because I loved them. They opened one in Denver, and it was only open here for like a few months, and it closed down. And I was so mad because I was like, a lot
of lawyer fees they had to pay.
There was a place, and it was, again, New York's better, but there was a place on like Broadway in Ellsworth that was called Famous Pizza. And it was like Greek. The people who owned it were Greek, and they made really good pizza there. Like that before, I think even better than Borriello Brothers. But of course, with all the new stuff coming in,
disagree.
Someone bought that building. You're wrong. Famous Pizza was the best, but they don't exist anymore. So like, it doesn't matter. And I was very mad when
probably
they
swimming in an
closed
11-mile reservoir somewhere. You know what I mean? That's why they don't exist anymore. There's actually one guy I went to business school with him. The guy's name is Rosenberg, and he has a place called Rosenberg's in Denver. And he spent $100,000 building a water machine that could replicate the Catskill city water here. And he does make legit bagels, and he's the largest importer of Taylor ham outside of the state of New Jersey and city of New York. But his only problem is that he machine presses his bagels versus hand rolls them, and that's his only screw up. But that place sells out all the time. He's got a couple locations open now, but for all you East Coasters or who want some authentic, somewhat East Coast food, you got to go to Rosenberg's in Colorado.
I'm not the biggest bagel person, so like I don't like what.
Well, you haven't had the right bagel.
Which ones are
you
bad.
Haven't had the right bagel. It's just
I do say though, like the bagels in New York were better, but
fantastic.
But I was like, that's not something I really like care too much about. Pizza, on the other hand, I really wish, someone would like, I don't know. Maybe we need more mob.
I'll call up some people, my friends down in Edgewater. Maybe we can make that happen.
We need a new front somewhere here to start selling pizza.
I think we have had such an amazing discussion today. I'm so glad you came on the podcast. And what are some of your closing remarks here? Like, we have the primaries coming up here in a few days. We're trying to get people out to vote. We've had some divisions in the Republican Party here between the state GOP and the establishment GOP. What is your message to Colorado? Why should they vote for you? What can we do to do it better? And where can people find you on social media and everything else so they can connect with you and have these types of conversations?
Yeah, I'm on pretty much all the socials. It's Archuleta, the number 4 CO. That's what it is on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube. So Archuleta, the number 4 CO. And you'll find me there. My website is archuletaforcolorado.com, all spelled out. But one, I would say, for myself, vote. I need, you want to support me because I'm going to bring change to a Congress. I think it's ridiculous that for CD1, if you go back all the way 50 years, we've only had 2 representatives come from Colorado. That's not, I'm sorry, to come
That's
from
wild.
CD1. There was one lady there for like 25 years, and now our current one's been there for 30 years. And so it's time for change. We need representation that actually represents who Denver is. I was born and raised here. This is my city. I will represent it well. For my fellow Republicans of Colorado, we need to come together. We're not going to be happy with everything that happens in this primary. I don't know. We'll find out on Tuesday. And a lot of our little, squabbles that have happened this past month, people were passionate and emotional. But we need to come together. There are bigger, more important issues we need to fight for, and different representation we need to be sending, not just to Washington, but to Denver at the Capitol. We need to win these House races in Colorado. Like I said, I think we just need 4 more seats to get rid of that supermajority in the House, and we need to keep our Senate. We only have 1 seat that's keeping them from having a supermajority in both houses. So, we may not be happy with the outcome. We may not be happy with a lot of conversations, but ultimately we need to unite and go forward. And if we aren't happy with our candidates, we need to start looking 2 years down the road. These elections are all coming up again. So if you don't like the person who's running for your House district or your congressional district, maybe you need to run, or maybe you need to start talking to people who you think would be good candidates and encouraging them to run. Because I think a lot of times we wait till the last minute and then we're like, I don't really like any of these candidates. Maybe we need to be involved sooner. Start looking at 26, if you're not happy with the candidates we have now. But whoever we end up with now is who we have. Let's get them elected, and move forward.
Awesome, man. I appreciate this conversation, and I'm going to pull you off. I'm going to do my outro. Just hang on for a minute. I want to definitely have that backside conversation with you. But thank you for coming on the Tuxes and Tomahawks podcast. Make sure you follow Valdamar Archuleta. There we go. See, I said it right this time. On all his socials, get to know him as much as you can. We got 3 days, people. Denver, get out there and vote. Let's get America First conservative candidates in here. And I'm excited to see where this goes. So thanks again for coming on the show. Well, guys, I just want to thank all of you for coming on the show. I'm Adam Dorito, host of the Tuxes and Tomahawks podcast. And like I said, I am here to give a voice to all these candidates and get them out there and really understand what the hell is going on in Colorado. We can take back our party. We can get Trump elected. We can have these America First values embedded back in our constitutional republic, because we don't live in a democracy, people. All right. And I just want to follow me on Instagram, Adam.Dorito2010. That's my biggest platform. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all that other fun stuff. You guys have a good one, and we're out of here.